talking with hospice nurse Penny about how her TikTok videos about end-of-life care have become a social media phenomenon. You're connected with the Heart of Hospice. I'm Helen Bauer, here with Jerry Fenter.
Whether you're a family caregiver or an end-of-life professional, we're here to enhance your hospice experience by connecting you with information you can use about end-of-life care. This episode is sponsored by BeyondWordsCo.com. Beyond Words ensures no one feels alone through life's hardest times. Their care packages support those going through grief, loss, or difficult life transitions. You can also send a care package for birthdays, retirements, promotions, well wishes to encourage, say thank you, or just show appreciation. Order your custom care package at BeyondWordsCo.com.
We like all our guests, but I have to say that today's guest is cool.
And she's cool?
Yeah, in ways that we are obviously not. Okay, so we are hospice geeks. I get that. But she is fun. She's funny. She's creative. Today we're talking with hospice nurse Penny.
Yes, so if you've had the opportunity to see her TikTok videos, you'll know just how cool she really is. So here's the unusual thing about Penny. She is a hospice geek because she's a quality and regulatory nurse.
Yes.
And yet she's doing these TikTok videos that are just amazing.
They're just fun, is what it comes down to.
They are. They're fun, and they're educational, and they really, really get people's attention.
So Penny Smith is a certified hospice and palliative care RN. She's been in hospice for 17 years, working in a variety of care settings and roles within hospice. She's worked inpatient, home case management, education, and quality and regulatory issues. Penny is a passionate advocate for hospice education. She's on a mission to normalize the end-of-life process, and during the pandemic, she found a really unique way to utilize her experience working in end-of-life care to provide education to a much bigger audience.
Right. And on the TikTok videos, she uses a variety of, I guess we'll call it teaching styles.
Right. Dark humor.
Right. Dancing even, and storytelling. And she has gathered over 450,000 followers on TikTok, 100,000 on Instagram. And her, I don't think you call it a hashtag.
Username.
Yes. At Hospice Nurse Penny. That's where you can find her. But you can find her today right here on the Heart of Hospice podcast. Hospice Nurse Penny, we are so glad to have you on the Heart of Hospice podcast. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Okay, we're going to open with an icebreaker question just to get the conversation started. It's not actually even hospice related. So if you could only have one color of clothing in your wardrobe, what color would that be, Penny?
Oh, that's super easy. And you can probably guess. It's pink.
To match the streak in your hair. Awesome. And hot pink, not that demure baby
hot
pink. Yeah.
No, not baby pink. That's, no, it's got to be bright. Hot pink. Fluorescent pink is even better.
Nice.
Harkening back to my days in the 80s when the fluorescent pink first made its appearance into the fashion scene.
Oh my gosh. I'm not going to say anything about that. Date myself, right?
And so your tastes have not changed since the 80s when it comes to colors, huh?
Nope. Nothing ever changed. I'm still in my 20s at heart, so got to maintain my youth somehow.
Hey,
I like that. You and I are about the same age, so that sounds good to me.
So Penny, we are really curious to get to know you a little bit better, and we would like to find out, how did you get into end-of-life care? How did you start your career as a hospice nurse?
Well, so first of all, I always like to tell people that I didn't become a nurse until I was 42 years old. I was 40 when my ex-husband and I decided to get a divorce, and I had been a stay-at-home homeschooling mom. His stepmother, during the course of our marriage, got cancer and was on hospice. And so my first experience with hospice nurses was through her. When we decided to get divorced and I needed to go back to school for something and decided to be a nurse, I knew that I wanted to do some kind of service work. Also, in my far past, I had kind of a rough life, got in trouble with the law, had some issues with drugs, and really felt like I wanted to do something that was meaningful, that would help people, that would kind of um, give back in a way to society and make up for kind of the transgressions of my youth. So I knew it was going to be service work, and had that exposure to hospice through my stepmother-in-law, and decided that that was the path that I would want to take.
So it was more like a calling and a pulling in the right direction instead of a stumble discovering by accident.
Yeah, really. I mean, when people say they're called to hospice, to me, it almost feels, I don't know, a little disingenuous, but really it kind of was. I mean, it kind of was, because it was either going to be hospice. The other thing that I had in my mind at that time, there was a lot of abuse in nursing homes that was starting to be on the news quite a bit. And so I thought, okay, it's either going to be hospice or go work in a nursing home where I can make a difference. I just really wanted to be able to do something where I could make a difference. And when I first graduated from nursing school, I was actually a licensed practical nurse to begin with. I didn't know that LPNs could work in hospice. I thought you had to be an RN. And I took the first job that came along, which was in a clinic. And even though all of my fellow nursing students would say, don't go work in a clinic because you'll lose all your skills, I said, well, the only skills I have is putting a Foley catheter in a dummy and giving an orange a shot. So I wasn't too worried about it. I just needed to get a job quickly so that my ex-husband and I could live separately, because we stayed together in the same house while I was going through nursing school, even though we were in the process of divorcing. So went to work in a clinic at first. And so that really reinforced my desire to go work in a field where I was not only going to make a difference in people's lives, but was really working with people who were the sickest of the sick. You know, you do encounter, when you're working in a clinic, people who are looking for medications, you know, or people who are, let's see, how can I say this nice? Hypochondriacs. I mean, you're working with sick people, but you're working with like all different kinds of situations. And,
Right.
and I knew that, like, if you go to work in hospice, you really are taking care of people who direly need your services. So that was
Yes.
another kind of pull in that direction.
Well, I think working in a clinic definitely hones skills that you need across the board.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Oh, I learned so much working in the clinic. Like my assessment skills, you know, I developed my assessment skills. I learned all about medications and lab values. Yeah. So if you're a nursing student listening to this podcast, don't believe anybody, especially your fellow students, who tell you not to go work in a clinic, because they don't know.
Right. There are skills to be learned and to be utilized in a clinic.
Definitely.
How long have you worked in hospice care, Penny?
So I've worked in hospice care for almost 17 years, I want to say. I'm trying to do the math in my brain. More than 17 years.
Wow.
I worked in the clinic for 1 year, and then I went to med-surg for 3 months and was laid off, because they do this cyclical LPN layoff thing in hospitals. You know, and so I was like, well, what am I going to do now? And during that time, I had started dating my current husband, and he lived near a hospice house that was going to be opening soon. So when I got laid off, I thought, well, I'm an LPN, but what the heck, I'm going to check into it anyway. And went there and applied. And sure enough, they were hiring LPNs, and I have worked in hospice ever since.
You know, an LVN was really the first one who trained me in bedside skills in hospice. And they're sort of the unsung heroes we forget. But they are some of the best hospice clinicians I have ever worked with, LVNs and LPNs, amazingly skilled people.
Yeah, well, we do, like in hospice, the LPNs do and LVNs do all the skilled procedures. You know,
Yeah.
the RNs really did the more administrative stuff. And I was doing all of the med passing and titrating infusions and accessing ports and putting in catheters and wound care and all kinds of, I did the routine hospice patient assessments. And so, yeah, I did a lot as an LPN. I learned a lot as an LPN, and being in a hospice care center as my first experience working in hospice, I was just immersed in death and dying. I always say it was at the bedside, death and dying care. You know, like you're there and you're learning every bit about the dying process while you're able to work in that environment.
Yeah, incredible skills. So let's fast forward. Let's fast forward to what you're doing these days. You have become a TikTok phenomenon. Can we use that word?
I think so, yes. I think that would be appropriate. And TikTok seems like a rather unusual social media platform for hospice. Let's just be honest.
Right.
But you're using it rather effectively, I think, because you have a lot of followers on TikTok, don't you?
Yes. I have 460,000 followers on TikTok, and I just went over 100,000. I have 106,000 on Instagram. My Instagram account just recently kind of took off also.
And you're not just doing videos. It's not just pictures. You dance. So you tell us. You tell us about the content that you're using and the methods that you're using to post on TikTok and Instagram.
So I do, as you said, dancing around, lip syncing, the TikTok trends, they call them, where you do like a little anywhere from 8 seconds to 15, 20-second long clip of music that you lip sync to and dance around and point to words. And I do that. I use a lot of dark humor. I answer questions that I get in the comments, just straightforward hospice education. And I tell stories. I do story time. So yeah, I use a variety of teaching styles. I believe in, I'm a big fan of adult learning. People learn in different ways. I'm also a fan of teaching younger people, and there are a lot of them on TikTok. And I feel like using trends is a great way to reach the younger generation. Also, it lightens up a dark subject. Death is a dark, scary subject, and sometimes people find it a little bit more palatable if there's some humor or lightness around it.
You know, one of the reasons we started the podcast was because we saw such a need for education, that people need to be educated about hospice, about end of life, and to really talk about this subject in a very open way. And we did that using the podcast platform, but you've really opened it up with doing this on TikTok and Instagram and using these, I guess they call them reels, to video what you're doing and educate people. So I love it because you're actually educating the community at large, the population at large, about hospice and about end-of-life care through those things. So I think it's awesome. What kind of responses have you received from your videos?
I get a lot of positive responses. People will let me know that even if I've done kind of a silly, trendy little video where I'm dancing around pointing at words, I have people who respond telling me that the information that they just saw in my video helped them to understand the dying process more. They no longer have guilt about something they experienced with their person who died years ago. People who tell me that they have just gone through somebody being on hospice and they were able to know exactly what was happening because they were watching my videos, and my videos helped them to understand what they were seeing was normal. I'm really big on normalizing the dying process. I use the hashtag normalize death a lot. Normalize death because death is normal. And I use that because in my experience, when I have been taking care of patients and their families, there were so many times when a family was really upset and concerned that something was happening with their person that was a normal part of the dying process, but they had never seen it before. And it was scary to them. And I would say, oh, yeah, that's normal. Actually, we see this all the time. And they would say, it's normal. And yeah, it's normal. And their relief was palpable. You could really see that brought them so much comfort and relief. So I do get a lot of responses from people, just telling me that they understood now that it wasn't something they should be worried about, that their person wasn't suffering, that everything was okay. So I get a lot of responses like that. I get some negative responses. There are some people who are not fans of hospice, but thankfully, it is more positive than negative.
So what would you say are the videos that get the most response? Are there any in particular? I mean, you've done, I don't even know how many videos you've done, a lot, I'm sure. Is there any one that's more popular than the others?
Yeah. So, well, there's kind of several different genres that reach people. I do some of these videos that really are focused on end of life visioning or deathbed visions, where, as a dying person is often seeing deceased loved ones or even pets. That's so common in hospice, as you know. It's even written into our literature. It's a sign to us that somebody is approaching the end of life. We ask our patients about it often because we're trying to gauge where they are in their dying process. And so I do some videos about that and depicting like spirits. I have a editing tool that allows me to make it look like there's actually a ghost in the room. And those are really popular. The trends are very popular. I think probably I would have to say the ones where I'm doing a 15-second dancing or acting out, pointing to words, those are the most popular. I also have some where I've done education. I have one right now that it's actually pinned to the top of my profile. It's had over 1 million views, and it's just me explaining that a dying person doesn't need to eat and why. Food is fuel. We don't need fuel when we're dying. Our body is shutting down. And using little, they call them stickers, but they're just basically little emoji pictures at the top of the screen, kind of demonstrating what I'm talking about in these silly little pictures. So it just kind of makes it fun, I guess you would have to say. It's a little bit fun. And that one has done really well. And those types have done really well. Stories often do really good too. Like any kind of inspirational stories do well.
How did you learn to do all of this? I mean, it obviously takes some technical expertise. Did you just teach yourself to do this, or did you have a 15-year-old somewhere around that you were
to teach you how to
that was
do
helping
it?
you?
No, I taught myself. I just kept watching a lot of TikToks and being like, oh, I want to learn how to do that. And there are tutorials on TikTok, so you can learn how to do these things and through trial and error. Like if you go back to the beginning of my first ones that I was doing, they're not as great. In fact, I remember somebody commenting once, I used to use this little transition when I was telling a story or talking about something. I would do this little transition where it makes this little kind of blurred out streaky thing in between each clip. And somebody commented and said, I don't like the way you put that little thing, that little transition in there. And I thought to myself, oh, shut up, And then later I looked back and I was like, oh, she was right. That does look really unprofessional. So I don't do that anymore.
Oh, I think anybody that does any sort of social media creating, the podcast was the same way. Your first pancake, you burn.
Yeah.
We had quite a few burned pancakes at the very beginning when we started the podcast.
Yes, that's for sure.
So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about working in end-of-life care, working in the hospice industry. So there's been quite an upheaval over the last couple of years with the pandemic. A lot of challenges like most aspects of healthcare. What keeps you working in this industry? What is your why?
I am very passionate about end of life care and hospice. I think, my why really comes down to feeling strongly about the need for people to accept death and dying, because I've seen how that can impact not only the person who's dying life, but their family, the people who they are leaving behind. I've seen situations where people were afraid to talk about that elephant in the room, and the person died. There was no closure. They never got to say goodbye. They never got to tell that person who died what they meant to them. And it can be so much better, like we can do so much of a better job with dealing with the death of somebody who we love if we're informed and accept it. So I've just always been really passionate about end of life care. I also have learned through doing TikToks that I was not the only one who suffered from death anxiety, which I had, to the point of it being almost crippling for me when I was in my 30s. And going into hospice alleviated that for me. And I learned, as I said, through doing TikToks that I wasn't the only one. Like a lot of people have reached out to me and said, I have severe death anxiety and I've been watching your videos and it's going away. And I've learned that because we don't talk about death and dying enough, people have a real fear around it. It's unknown, and you're always going to fear the unknown. And the more that we have this conversation about it and we normalize it and we get to a place of accepting it, I always say we don't have to like it, but we do have to accept it because it's inevitable. The more that death anxiety can be relieved for people.
If there's a void of information, right? You don't see a death. We've clinicalized it. Medicalized it. So it happens in the hospital. It's very sanitary. It's, grandma dies in the hospital. We see her in the coffin embalmed, but you miss, right? You miss out on the dying process and what that looks like. So we have a tendency to fill that void either with our imaginations or with what the movies and society tell us it should look like.
Yes.
The deathbed confessions, the deathbed reconciliation, Michael Landon standing at the bedside with the white light singing the song. So education like this really does. I've never had a hospice professional, I don't want to say admit, but disclose that they had death anxiety that was alleviated. But I would have to say that I probably share in that now that I think about it.
Yeah, I mean, there's just something about recognizing the natural end of life, the natural, normal end of life. So you were asking me about TikToks that I've done that have been popular. And one that I did recently, I actually, it was very short. It was maybe 8 seconds long. And I said in the first little bubble of text, having a fear of seeing a dead person before being a hospice nurse. And then in the second one, I have kind of more of a relieved look or a more like a compassionate look or like calm look, saying, recognizing the beauty of a completed life. And I had so many comments from people saying like, a completed life. Oh my gosh, I never looked at it that way. That's so beautiful. I mean, the video went viral and people were just crazy about it, like a completed life. That's such a beautiful way of looking at it. And that's how I kind of see it. It's like the end to the circle of life is death,
Yeah, completion.
And it can be beautiful. It doesn't have to be scary. I mean, it's always going to be sad because we're going to miss somebody, we know that, but it doesn't have to be scary. I think that's the biggest part for me is you don't have to be scared that your person is going through something horrible.
When someone you know is going through grief and loss or a difficult life change, a care package from BeyondWordsCo.com is the perfect way to show you care. Founder Katherine Hines learned through her own grief experience that the gift responses we offer could be so much better. Whether you're wanting to show support to someone dealing with a challenging medical diagnosis or encourage a friend going through a difficult life transition, Beyond Words can create a care package for someone you care about. The care package items are thoughtfully selected, sensitive to the grief experience, and come in earth-friendly packaging. Each item included in a Beyond Words care package has been hand-selected to bring comfort and honor self-care. Even the colors are chosen with intention, in shades of sky blue, restoring greens, and peaceful earth tones to calm, soothe, and uplift. They can even design a care package that's appropriate for workplace giving. Order your care package at beyondwordsco.com today and ensure that your loved one doesn't feel alone during life's toughest times. You've been in this industry now for 17 years, you said, more than 17 years.
Yeah.
So what do you think has been the most meaningful part of working in hospice for you?
Well, so, I don't do direct patient care anymore. I'm a hospice quality manager. So I don't do direct patient care. I would say my favorite environment to work in was working in an inpatient hospice care center, being with families and patients really right at the very end. That was really meaningful to me. But then I say that, and then I think about being a case manager where you kind of actually get to know people on their turf, and it's a longer period of time because they're not those, acutely sick people who are dying really quickly. And you get to know them for a longer period of time, more personally in their environment. So, I could actually tell you like an event that happened as I was a hospice nurse, caring for a patient that was the most meaningful to me. And that was a young woman. She was in her 40s. She had lung cancer. She was in her parents' home because she could no longer be in her own home. She had two daughters who were in their early 20s, like 21 and 23. She had severe terminal agitation. They did not want to send her to an inpatient care setting. They were determined to keep her at home. So we had her hooked up to multiple infusions. She had 4 infusions. She had 2 dilaudid infusions because we were doing subcutaneous infusions, and you're kind of limited by volume when you're doing subcutaneous infusions. So we had 2 dilaudid infusions. We had a Versed infusion, and we had a methadone infusion, which we had never even done in the agency I worked for. It was kind of like brand new to do a methadone infusion. And she was still extremely agitated. She had lots of pain. And then we put her on phenobarbital injections. And finally, we got her sedated. We were doing palliative sedation at the end because she was so incredibly agitated, being young, not wanting to leave her daughters. Finally got her symptoms managed, and she was calm. She was no longer in pain. She was completely sedated. And her daughters and I bathed her. I helped her daughters, and we bathed her. And her sister, who was my age, said to me, I don't want to put her in a diaper. It's so undignified. Could we not put her in a diaper? And I said, yeah, we don't have to put her in a diaper. We'll put her in panties. And if she soils herself, we'll clean her up. No big deal. So we bathed her. They put this, her favorite lotion, good smelling lotion on her. We washed her hair, combed her hair, and then put her leopard print panties and her favorite t-shirt on. And, it was just the most amazing experience to be able to help those girls have that moment with their mom when she had been suffering for weeks as we tried to get her symptoms under control, and then later on, and I actually went to that funeral. I really made it a policy to never go to funerals because that's all you ever do if you choose to go to funerals for your patients. But I had such a strong relationship with them. I just really felt the need to do that. So I did go to her funeral. There were hundreds of people. It was a Catholic service. There were hundreds of people there. It was an amazing event. And then several months later, I was out for dinner with my husband, and her daughters walked into the restaurant where we were and came over and sat with us. And we talked about their mom and what a wonderful experience it was. And it's really, really one of my most memorable and favorite experiences I've ever had in hospice nursing.
Yeah, that's the kind of experience that you never forget. You never forget. That's the legacy of working as a hospice nurse. It's a pretty amazing part of what we do, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
So as you look at the way things are right now in the hospice industry, what do you want to see changed? Or what's your wish list? Let's put it that way. What's your wish list? What would you put on your wish list for hospice right now?
Well, first I have to address what I think is concerning to me, that I think it leads to what I would like to see addressed. That's what's concerning to me. It's getting to be so tightly regulated that it's really challenging to do the kind of care that we've done in the past. When I started doing hospice, and I worked in a care center, but the home hospice nurses used to carry morphine in their trunks because they needed to have it like on hand with them. Right now, we provide a comfort kit, so it's there. But just things have changed and evolved over the years to where it's more challenging to do patient care in these sometimes really urgent needs. I also see, because of the nursing shortage, that we're hiring nurses who have very little experience. And I have all the time through social media nurses reaching out to me saying, I'm a new grad, or I'm going to be graduating soon, and I want to be a hospice nurse just like you. What do you recommend? And I say, I recommend don't try to be a hospice nurse yet.
Get some training before you do it.
Get some training. Unless you can go into an inpatient care center like I did, if you're going to be a home hospice nurse, you're going to be out there in a vacuum, and you have to have excellent skills. And I'm not just talking about putting in a Foley catheter. I am talking about dealing with an emotional, anxious family, understanding the dying process, being able to navigate your way through that and explain to them what is happening with their person. Those are the things that you have to know how to do before you can be a hospice nurse. But as far as what I would like to see changing, I understand regulations, but I wish they'd stop getting tighter and tighter with them. But mostly, I would like to see Medicare stop requiring patients to decide to discontinue curative treatment before coming on hospice. I think if we could bring people onto hospice who were, especially cancer patients who were still seeking chemotherapy or radiation or whatever treatment, I think there would be a smoother transition for them to hospice. I actually think it would happen sooner. I think it would save money for Medicare if they would allow us to bring people on earlier before they're continuing all these treatments, so that they could, have what we have to offer and kind of make that transition. We have a lot of people who are referred to hospice they're just not ready to give up their TPN. They're not ready to give up their IV fluids. They're not ready to stop their treatment. And they end up coming onto hospice and dying a week later. And there are so many more things that we could have done for them if they would have come on earlier.
Right.
And likely they would have discontinue those treatments earlier on when they realized that we can help them with their symptoms and improve their quality of life. So that's a biggie for me.
I think that's on all our wish lists these days. We hear the same things from everybody, but it's true. I think people want to feel safe, and going from aggressive care with a team that and then being turned over to a bunch of people you don't know, and letting go of everything that they've told you, if you don't have chemo, you'll die. If you don't have dialysis, you'll die. And then they tell you, okay, you have to stop all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, of course, so I'm going to die. That's been drilled into my head by the healthcare team that I've had. It always seems to be such a drop instead of a transition.
Yes.
And of course, that's where palliative care helps to overlap into that. But all of hospice includes palliative care as well. So I think the healthcare industry just doesn't do a good job of educating, going back upstream, and how do we utilize that? But man, changes to the regulations, I would add my name to that list of people who would like those things to change. Definitely. Yeah. Speaking of wishes, what would you wish that patients and families knew about the hospice teams that provide their care?
Oh, there's so many things. First of all, we're not trying to cause your person to die faster. That's a biggie, because so many people think that we want you to come on service earlier because we do have a lot to offer, and we want to get to know you so that we can better meet your needs, that we are there not just for the patient, we're there for the family. And that is something that's really important for people to understand. We want to be able to help this whole unit go through this process, this dying process together in the best way possible, given under the circumstances. I want people to meet every member of the hospice team and not just dismiss, any of them out of hand, AKA the chaplain, because so many people think the chaplain's all about religion. And I was guilty of that myself. Before I went into hospice, I was in the hospital. I was going through major surgery. It was a military hospital. The chaplain came to see me. He was a priest in a military uniform with the little priest collar and everything. I am not a religious person. And when he came to see me, my immediate thought was, he thinks I'm going to die in this surgery. And it freaked me out. Like he's going to try to, get me to see my way to heaven or something, so I didn't understand that the chaplain is not there to try to convince anybody of anything. They're there for spiritual support for everybody, And so I think that's something I would want all families to know is that you can get so many different types of support from every member of your team. And don't say no to the hospice aide. Just because you're able to get in the shower by yourself now, don't reject the hospice aide, because later on, when you need somebody to wipe your butt or teach your family how to wipe your butt, let it be somebody that you've gotten to know, not a perfect stranger who's walking in and meeting you for the first time. And that was something I would tell my patients all the time when they rejected my aide. I would say, just let her come and put a load of laundry in for you, or, fix you a sandwich or do your dishes. I just want you to get to know her so that further down the road, when you need more help, she's not a stranger to you.
Oh, that's really good advice. I like that.
That's a really good way to get them involved then. Probably the same thing with volunteers as well. That having volunteers involved with the patient and the family early on really can make a huge difference.
Yeah, volunteers are fantastic. We love our volunteers. I mean, we have volunteers that do everything for, as you know, it's required by Medicare that we have volunteers.
Right.
I think it's probably the only healthcare service line that requires volunteers to be a part of the delivery of service. But yeah, I love volunteers.
We should do an episode on nothing but what we wish patients and families knew about hospice and hospice teams.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That would be an awesome one. That would be fun.
So Penny, what's next for you? I'm assuming you're still going to stay on TikTok. You've got things that you still want to do. Do you ever find it hard to come up with new ideas?
I've always been creative. I've always been creative. I was in community theater and I sang in a rock band for a while. And so I love creating. Sometimes I'll get into like a little bit of I don't know what I'm going to do. And then I just read through my comments and there's a question, or sometimes even through the course of a podcast, something will come up and I'll be like, that's what I should do a TikTok about. And I just keep watching the TikToks and seeing what the trends are. So I might every now and then for a day or two feel like I don't know what to do. But then quickly something comes back to my mind and I'm able to come up with something.
Good. Do you have a schedule that you release, or do you just, whenever you're inspired, you come up with it, create it, and push it out?
Yeah, what I do sometimes is sometimes I'll have a lot of ideas and I'll make a whole bunch of TikToks. I'll just batch them all and they'll be all in my drafts, and then I'll be able to just kind of release them, a couple at a time. And that also frees me up to not have to be making TikToks every single day.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, you have quite a following, and we're going to introduce our listeners to you. And how can they follow you on Instagram and on TikTok?
My username on both of those platforms is @HospiceNursePenny, all one word. Hospice Nurse Penny.
Hospice Nurse Penny. We'll have a link in the show notes so that our listeners can go straight in and connect with you and see the content that you're pushing out and add their questions and their watches to the views that you've already got going. And thank you so much for the content that you're putting out. I love it that you're using some creative means, some creative platforms to make that happen.
Thank you.
So you see why we like her so much. And, we were on video. Unfortunately, just listening to the podcast, you can't see this wonderful chunk of bright pink hair that she has. It's so cool.
It is.
So cool.
Is. She was wonderful. I mean, we spent so much time before we actually started the interview talking with her and commiserating about all of the things that we've seen.
That was pretty much my fault, I have to say, because of my background in quality and regulatory jobs, working in compliance. She and I were talking about this regulation and how we deal with the compliance issues. And, do you see this? Yes, I see it too. Do you see that? It was pretty funny.
Yeah, I have to say, I kind of sat and listened more than I engaged with you guys in that.
Yeah, that super nerdy, super technical stuff.
It
the
is.
Stuff that sucks the joy out of the room. When you're with a bunch of healthcare people, absolutely. But she's wonderful. We would definitely recommend, whether you're a layperson or you're an end-of-life professional, a doula, part of a multidisciplinary team, go in and connect with Hospice Nurse Penny on Instagram, connect with her on TikTok, check out her videos, informative, creative. She finds a way to talk about these heavy topics with a little bit of lightness.
Right.
Is that a word?
It is. Yeah, a little levity perhaps as well. And the way that she does it in her videos and reels is, I don't know, it's educational,
right,
but it's also fun, if I can use that word to describe, some education about death and dying.
Sure.
But that's the way it is. And so if you are really curious now to find out how she does this, then you really do need to find her TikTok handle. Go there, watch some of those videos that she has. There's a link in our show notes. Check it out, and it'll take you right to her TikTok videos and her Instagram as well.
Thanks for listening to The Heart of Hospice. I'm Helen Bauer here with Jerry Fenter. Because we know your hospice journey is 24/7, you can always find us at theheartofhospice.com. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening, and please take a minute to leave a rating or a review on Apple Podcasts.
To connect with us, just send us an email to host@theheartofhospice.com. You can also find us on social media. And remember, no matter who you are or where you are in your hospice journey, you are the heart of hospice.